Alchemy, the science of understanding, deconstructing, and reconstructing matter. However, it is not an all-powerful art. It is impossible to create something out of nothing. If one wishes to obtain something, something of equal value must be given. This is the law of equivalent exchange, the basis of all alchemy. In accordance with this law, there is a taboo among alchemists. Human transmutation is strictly forbidden. For what could equal the value of a human soul?
Anime. It's been around since 1917, and it's brought us shows such as Astro Boy, which later brought us shows such as the legendary Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, the Gundam series, Sailor Moon. All of these anime have made a huge impact on pop culture, but only one stood above all else. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. You know, I grew up as your average millennial boy. I would come home from school and watch Toonami. My very first anime were Fooly Cooly and Dragon Ball Z. Later in life, I was a teenager and a friend recommended me a show that would change my perspective on anime and animation for the remainder of my life. Before Brotherhood, I used to think of anime as like bright colors and awesome fights, but after Brotherhood, want to know the only word that comes to mind? You guessed it, trauma. In all seriousness, Full Metal Alchemist is a work of art. I think that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is the greatest anime to ever exist, and today I'm going to explain why. For those of you that haven't seen Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I'm going to give you a quick recap on what exactly it's about. But let's be honest, 90% of the people who have watched anime have also watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, but who in their right mind hasn't seen Full Metal? I mean, really, nobody really comes to mind. So first, let's break down exactly what this story is. This show is based around two characters known as the Elric brothers, one being Edward Elric, and the other being Alphonse Elric. These two boys grew up basically in the middle of nowhere with their mother and their father left when they were really young. Basically, they're two boy geniuses in the world of alchemy, which I'll explain what alchemy is in just a moment. And one day their mother passes away. So with all the grief being left alone and essentially being orphans, they decided to do the one sin that every alchemist knows not to do: human transmutation. Now, when they attempt human transmutation, what they're trying to do is bring their dead mother back. But in the process of doing so, Edward lost an arm and a leg, literally, and Alphonse lost his entire body and now has his soul attached to a suit of armor. So for the remainder of the show, you follow Edward and Alphonse as they go through their journey to find the Philosopher's Stone to get their bodies back. In a world of alchemy, there is only one law that brings balance to this scary magic: the law of equivalent exchange. And the definition of this law is essentially anything that is given to you, you must then give back of equal or greater value, or if you give something to someone else or something else, then you must receive equal or greater value. This goes from anything from the dirt in the ground to the blood in your body. In order to use alchemy, it requires a transmutation circle, and as well as the knowledge of what you're transmuting. If you want to create a spear out of the Earth's surface, then you need to know the chemical breakdown of what that spear is made out of. If there's something that's broken and you want to fix it, easy. You can transmute it and you can fix it, but you have to have the knowledge of how to fix it. Using alchemy doesn't make you God in this universe. There's checks and balances to everything that you do with alchemy. Now that you guys know what the story is about, I think it's time we talk about the meat and potatoes of the show, also known as the
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist.
Now, the driving force for Ed and Al is the existence of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is known to ignore those laws of equivalent exchange. Therefore, if they got their hands on it, they'd be able to get Al's body back and Ed's arm and leg back. And on Ed and Al's adventure to find the Philosopher's Stone is the world's greatest anime plot I've ever seen. Most of the time in anime, you have your pilot episode, and then maybe some action scenes, and then you hit some filler. Then after some filler, you hit some more story, you hit some more action scenes, and then back to filler. But in Brotherhood, there's basically zero filler. Not even basically, there's none. There's no filler at all. Each episode plays an important part in the telling of the overall story. Anywhere from them meeting a random lady in a city, to a little girl and a dog, or maybe a family man that loves to brag about his wife and daughter. Every single thing that they do, or every single episode that you watch, plays a part. The story is so intricate that I've watched it 5 times in a row, and there's shit that I still miss. Even the very first villain you meet, which is up and gone within the first 1 or 2 episodes, makes a huge argument about why he's doing his villainous deeds, and you don't really think about it until you watch the entire show, and then you're like, oh shit, he was right. Every interaction they have and every person that they meet has a purpose. They meet Rose, and they use Rose to teach you about the value of life and death and what's possible and not possible. Edward becomes a state alchemist in the military, meaning that he has funding from the military to go do research and travel to find a way to get him and Al's bodies back. Now, them joining the military, they meet people such as Mustang and Armstrong and Hughes and Hawkeye, and there is no random character. In other anime, you'll have random banter throughout different episodes that don't add anything to the story. The dialogue in this show adds something on every single line. Whether that's Ed exploding about how short he is, or Al talking about how he can't sleep, he can't eat, he can't feel hot or cold because he doesn't have a body anymore. This show will keep your attention from scene to scene. If it's not a weird dog saying, "Big brother Ed," then it's Barry the Chopper telling you about how Alphonse may not even be real. This show is 64 episodes long, and it's had more plot and more development than any anime I've ever seen that has gone like hundreds of episodes long. Here's just an example of how well written the show is. As I mentioned, Ed gets really upset anytime anyone ever mentions that he might be short. As time goes on, they talk about the possibility of Ed's automail being the thing that's stunting his growth. They talk about how possibly he's eating and sleeping for both him and his brother's body. Ed starts shorter than Winry, and as the story goes, you'll notice that he gets a little bit taller. He gets more confident, his shoulders are more broad, and by the last episode, he's taller than Winry. Most of the time, for that type of growth in a character, they required a lazy time skip where, oh, don't worry about it, all this shit happened, you didn't need to see it. It was only like 5 years. And what's great about this change is that they don't have anybody explain that to you. You as the viewer discover through the storytelling, the knowledge that they give you, why it is that he got taller when he wasn't before. This show's story is so incredible. I've watched it 5 times, and every single time I've watched it, I've probably cried at least 4 times in the first 8 episodes. In this show, they also touch on what PTSD looks like. They touch on what war looks like. They have the Ishvalan War, which starts off with a soldier shooting a child in the face. Dear God! You'll see that in this war, the state alchemists carry the look of a killer, which essentially means the eyes of the killer is like a tired, exhausted, disgusted look on their face where they can barely carry on to the next day because of the sins they've committed in war. And through the Ishvalan War, where soldiers suffer with PTSD and trauma, the Ishvalan people are stuck with living in tents. They no longer have a home thanks to this war. The war creates a character known as Scar, whose one determination is to kill every state alchemist. And the reason why is because all the state alchemists at the time during that war were the ones assigned to essentially like level the city and kill all of the Ishvalans. And for the sake of his brother, he's set out to kill every single state alchemist. There's so many twists and turns and so much dialogue that really changes the perspective of what they're doing and if it's really worth it. If Ed and Al actually set out to do this thing where they get their bodies back, is it worth the sacrifices they have to make to do that? It plays heavy on sacrifice and loss and what it takes to get the things that you want and need. At the same time, it motivates you. It gives you hope there's a better answer for them. It gives you hope that each character that you meet has a happy ending, except for a few. There's a few characters you don't want them to have a happy ending. While we're on the topic, let's go ahead and talk about characters.
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist.
Brotherhood has so many outstanding and amazing voice actors and characters that it really just deserves its own video. In a lot of anime, you have just like maybe a handful at the very most of main characters that really get any development at all, and the rest of them are just kind of there for the ride. In this show, each individual character has development. Now we have an idea of who Ed and Al are, but we'll talk about some of the other characters as well, as each character you meet in this show plays an important part in the overarching story. You have Winry Rockbell and her grandmother Panako. Winry is Ed and Al's childhood best friend. She's a neighbor of theirs and she lives with her grandmother Panako. Her and her grandmother are automail engineers and she is absolutely obsessed with automail. Sadly, Winry's parents died during the Ishvalan War. Her parents were doctors and they were trying to save Ishvalan patients during the war. But then, in a fit of rage, one of their patients decided to get off the operating table and murder them in plain sight. Panako, her grandmother, also plays a huge role in the story. Now, she may just be an old grandma smoking out of a pipe and likes to hang out with her dog, but actually, she's the one that provides a home for Ed and Al. If it wasn't for her, then Winry wouldn't have the talent she has in automail, meaning that Edward probably wouldn't have automail at all. And speaking of Panako, she was also heavily connected to Hohenheim. Von Hohenheim is actually the father of Ed and Al. Von Hohenheim plays probably like the second most important role in the entire story. He has a direct relation to how things happen from way back in the day to now to how it happens in the future. Let's just say Hohenheim is a very, very, very old man with a lot of knowledge. You have the military, which consists of Führer Bradley, the state alchemists, and the soldiers. The state alchemists being Mustang and Armstrong, and you have Kimberly. For the soldiers, you have Maze Hughes, you have Jean Havoc, you have Maria Ross, and you have Hawkeye. All of these characters are carefully connected to each other. Mustang is determined to be the next Führer. He wants to make up for the things that he did in the Ishvalan War and killing innocent people. Armstrong follows in Mustang's footsteps. He's essentially a musclehead, but when it came to war, he decided that he wasn't really built for that. He wasn't okay with taking away innocent lives of children. So because he regrets his actions and regrets not making any actions to stop it from happening, he follows in Mustang's footsteps because he wants to make up for what he's done. Kimberly, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. He is a psychopath. He's what you would get if someone embraced the carnage and embraced the war. And then you have Hawkeye, who's Mustang's right-hand man, and also the best sniper in the military. You have Maze Hughes, who's this sweet family man who loves to brag about his wife and his daughter, and surely nothing bad happens to him, right? Right? And outside of them, you have Scar, who's the Ishvalan warrior. He's someone who had a brother who was studying in alchemy and had tattoos on his arms representing his research. When he died, he transmuted his own arms to his brother. And with those arms, specifically one of them, he's able to use alchemy to break things down and destroy. So he uses this arm as this righteous weapon in order to kill State Alchemist to avenge not only his brother, but his people. And the next group of people we have is the homunculi. Now, a homunculus is essentially a man-made human. Each homunculus represents a sin of man. So you have lust, gluttony, envy, sloth, greed, pride, and you have wrath. And of course, each one of these homunculi act as their sin, where gluttony is constantly trying to eat people, envy has the ability to transform into other people, lust uses her looks to get advantages, sloth is a giant brute that never wants to do anything, greed is someone who desires anything and everything, and to avoid spoilers, we won't really talk about who wrath and pride are. So aside from the homunculi, you also have the people of Xing. Xing, you have Mei, you have Ling and his ninjas, and Ling and Mei come from their country in order to find the Philosopher's Stone because they want the key ingredient for immortality. If they find the Philosopher's Stone, then they would be the next king or queen of their country. And so you get to see this inner working of essentially a China dynasty and how there's two families who are battling to become royalty. Ed and Al have someone that they call teacher whose name goes by Izumi, and Izumi is the one that actually taught them the proper use of alchemy. You learn that Izumi actually committed the same sin as Ed and Al. One thing I also want to mention about the characters is that the female characters in this show are some of the best female characters to ever exist in anime. Most of the time, female characters are just throwaway. They have barely any personality, or it's the same typical personalities that you see. But these female characters are fucking awesome. Winry's a badass in her own right, and she's considered to be one of the best automail engineers in the show. And then you have people like Armstrong's sister, who's Major General Armstrong, and she's the one that runs shit over at the Briggs Wall. And the Briggs Wall is essentially this huge wall covering the border in Amestris. And it's just nothing but fucking blizzards up there. As a matter of fact, we have someone out there by the Briggs Wall. Beta? It's fucking cold. Thanks for the update, Beta. Anyways, and then you have Hawkeye, who's saved Mustang on a couple of occasions. I mean, look at how she just whips the car around. It wasn't until later in life that I actually found out this show was made by a female mangaka. Hiromu Arakawa, I'm not going to say that again, was the one that actually wrote this manga. And it's thanks to her that we have these incredible female characters. And when you have all of these characters, you would think that somebody would have to fall through the holes, right? Someone would have to be like, well, they're not very important. They don't really need to play a part in the story. Nope, each individual character plays a big part in the story. And what was the key word that I mentioned before? That's right. Trauma. Izumi has trauma. Ed and Al have trauma. All the soldiers have trauma. And all of that trauma is because of this dominoes effect of hate. The hate the military had over the Ishvalans created Scar, who hates state alchemists, which creates more hate, until eventually you see that the hate has to stop somewhere. And each character is connected. The state alchemists are connected to Scar, and Scar is connected to Winry, and Winry is connected to Ed and Al, and Ed and Al is connected to Hohenheim, and Hohenheim is connected to the homunculus, and the homunculus are connected to the military. And you see that every single character has some path to the next character. And as you're going through the story and you're learning about these characters and how they develop and their personalities might change, or their perspective on what's right and what's wrong might change, you're listening to the most amazing score you possibly could listen to. So that brings me to my next subject, the music.
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist.
Akira Senju has created a plethora of songs that just really resonate with the emotions in this show. You may have noticed that while I've been talking about this show, I've been playing some of his music. All of these incredible songs are played throughout the entire show, and is played in such a way that it only represents specific emotions for you. You have these epic build-ups with these chants and the way that the violins are played. It's better than what most other shows give you. Sure, you can have your head chala, your Naruto music, and I know just from personal experience at the very least, that a lot of the songs from other shows are more of a nostalgia bait. You like them because you associate a certain episode to it, you associate certain characters from your favorite show to it. I mean, you could say the intro for Chainsaw Man is incredible, but you really only liked it because one, it was a trend, and two, because the dance was fun. But these songs aren't something that have an orchestra's worth of effort in it. At least not most of them. And not only is the music incredible, but there was one thing I haven't quite mentioned yet, and that would be the fight.
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist.
When it comes to the animation in this show, there's not a single episode that feels like it falls flat. Most of the time in shows, you see the animation dip for some episodes, and then all of a sudden they have a big budget for the big fight. But in this show, every single episode is animated incredibly, and every single fight is different from the last one. You'll notice that fights between Fuhrer Bradley and Greeling, fights with Alphonse, fights with Edward, you have fights with Scar. Every single one has incredible choreography. The movement, the decisions, the angles, every single thing is beautifully animated. Everything feels original and not reused or reskinned. Usually in anime and fights, you have someone explain the move that's happening and how it's happening and why it's happening. But in this show, they just said, we don't fucking need that guy. You can just watch this sick ass fight and enjoy it for what it is. That leads me to my final
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist.
This show, hands down, has changed my perspective on anime for the remainder of my life. It has shown me what real effort looks like. This show came out in 2009 and is now 2024, and it is still considered to be the best anime on 90% of the lists you see online. This show not only stood out for its time, but it is timeless. The background matters. The characters are all very well written. The power system of alchemy is pretty unique, but is handled in such a way that's better than what most anime are able to do. The depth behind each individual decision and choice that's made from each character in this show is something that carries with you. There's a reason it sat on top for 15 years. This show has made me cry. This show has made me laugh. I feel like when I watch this show, I walk away knowing more about my own life. It makes you think about the value of your life. It makes you think about what the most important things are in your life. This is what every anime should aspire to be. No more filler episodes. Every episode should have the same quality of animation. This is one of the only anime that I can suggest to somebody to watch in the English dub, because the voice acting is just that incredible. They just don't make shows like this anymore. Sure, you have a lot of really well animated shows and some very well written shows. This show does it really well in all places. There's nothing bad about the show. And if you haven't watched this show yet, I hope that this video showed you why you should. Because trust me when I say, after watching it, you're not going to look at shows the same. Also, bring some tissues, because in the first 4 episodes, you're gonna need a few of them. Oh shit, I forgot about Beta. Beta, are you good out there? I'm cold, I'm wet, I lost my other clothes, there's a green fucking dinosaur. Can someone transmute some food and some water and some shelter? Help me. Thanks, Beta. That guy, he's such a joker. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That would really help me out a lot. Let me know what other videos you would like me to make, and I'll be sure to consider them or not do them at all if they're terrible ideas. And that's pretty much it. All right, see you later.